You are watching and listening to the Two Chumps Football Podcast. I'm Chad Wilson. That is Emil Calomino, and the time has come. The time has come, Emil. We are going to fix college football today, or at least we're going to start on our way to fixing college football. That and our thoughts on some other football things here on the show today. Very pleased. You're not going to want to miss this show, all right? You're going to want to hear what we've got to say and how we are going to rearrange things in college football. This is the show that you want to have saved, pass on to your friends, debate in the comment section, all that great stuff. We are doing that today on the Two Chumps Football Podcast. If this is your first time here or you've been listening for a while and have yet to do this, slap yourself and then go ahead and subscribe to the show. Hit that subscribe button, whether you're listening or you're watching us on YouTube. Hit that up right now. Also, check out our sponsor. Check out our sponsor, Bovada Sportsbook, one of the oldest and safest sportsbook operating online. Great lines on all the other stuff that we've got coming up right now. March Madness right around the corner, Emil. It's a big time in the year for the degenerates. And for those of you out there that like to bet, so great odds there on all of that. NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, all that stuff coming in. Baseball season, Emil. I know you were very excited about that. Thought that was a Dodger sweat topic.
I don't like this baseball stuff starting overseas. Like, I'm not into that.
They're trying to grow these games. They're trying to grow the whole sport just like the NFL is doing. Remember they sent people to the sacrifice down in Brazil to open up the NFL season,
Yes.
the Eagles and the Packers? Yeah.
You and
everyone's trying to go in there.
Remember, baseball season started, and the Reds were the team that always seemed – I mean, they did. The first game was in Cincinnati early in the day, and, maybe your team played the first day or they played the second day. But this notion of sending two teams to Japan, Korea,
man, it's an American sport. If you want to do that later on, whatever, man.
Yeah.
But, let's see the Phillies versus the Pirates.
Yeah.
Maybe you let Washington start a game, or maybe you just start it off right now. Yankees and Red Sox, or Yankees and Orioles, or Dodgers and Giants in the good old USA.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, the degenerates can go to Bovada, back to the sponsor, and you guys can play March Madness because you all know you're taking off Thursday and Friday. That's what they're doing. Guys, it's like a holiday.
Literally odds on any and everything. They're available at Bovada. So go ahead and hit that link in the description and support our sponsors here on the Two Chumps Football Podcast. Emil, before we get into this whole rearranging of furniture that we are going to do in college football, because you've heard of both of us going on and on about college football, everything from our conferences don't make sense to kids shouldn't just be able to pick up and leave whenever the heck they want in conjunction with NIL money. All right, those two things existing the way that they are shouldn't happen. I don't think we're in a minority there. But aside from all of that, there was other stuff going on. A combine, Emil, which I used to be really into. The combine. I used to really sit there.
And I contest that. You did watch a lot of it. I remember.
I used to ooh and ah over the 40-yard dash times and all that. But Emil, somewhere along the line, it just really got watered down. I don't know what it is. I guess I got sick of it. I tell people this story all the time. We went from not ever being able to see anything that went on in the combine. So like Deion Sanders' 40-yard dash at the combine is just folklore. No one saw it actually, or at least a common fan never saw any of that, to being able to see just about everything that they do there. And I remember watching Calvin Johnson at the combine come to the line, and it said the graphic 6'5", maybe some change, 238 pounds. Cool. Said, man, if this guy at that size gets in here and runs 4 or 5, that is just going to be like ridiculous. A guy that size moving like that would be insane. He ran and it was 4.35, Emil. I turned off my TV and I unplugged it from the wall and said, that's fake. There's no way that happened. I'm a DB. I don't want a world where receivers that size run that fast. That's insane. I unplugged it. I almost called Comcast at the time and said, look, something's up with my TV.
And then you realize about a year or two later that was completely accurate.
No, instantly, man, because he was, came straight into the NFL and showed that was indeed a fact. But since then, though, Emil, you've just had like a 4.540 is pedestrian now. Everyone runs 4.4s, and now they scoff at you like a French waiter if you don't order wine with your meal if you run a 4.4. So I don't know, man. It's just,
you know what that is, though, and this really comes down to almost all facets of life that we measure. You can, we'll use the word study. You can study to the test, right? So you got people that say, oh, well, you need X to get into a school on your SATs. You might not be the best student, or if you're going to be an engineer, you might not end up being the best engineer, but you might get 1,500 on your SATs if you're smart enough and then study to the test.
Yeah, you can prep for the test. It's not just even what you know, it's just how you know it and how you can get the right answer, even if you don't exactly know the right answer.
Understand it. You might not, and that's what I see happening with sports, not just the combine, all levels, of sports. I mean, they're training kids, and once in a while on certain social media platforms, you're on a couple with me. There's a major league player who throws up training videos of guys doing stupid things.
Yes.
And, like they have kids running full tilt and unleashing baseballs into a mat and giving them readouts like 97 miles an hour. Well, that's great, except you don't know where the ball's going.
They're doing this in the NFL too now. Did you know that? They gauge your miles per hour on a throw, and it's the same deal. You're standing certain distance away, and you're firing the ball into a mat, and they took your miles per hour on it. I just think a lot of this now has just turned into a television show production. Something for people to ooh and ah over, hold an audience, sell some sponsorships. And that's what it's kind of turned into, and it's kind of taken away.
Combination. I'll agree with you that I think a lot of it is money driven for audience, and a lot of it's driven by nerds. I mean, some nerd with a spreadsheet.
They love numbers.
Right. Hey,
they love numbers.
If a guy can do this, I can project with a formula that he'll be able to play 3 years at quarterback.
Right. Cut it out, sir. There's a lot of stuff going on there that's going to fall outside of that. I just have always... Listen, you've got running backs running the 40-yard dash from a three-point stance, which no one gets in anymore. Yep. And they're running with their head down for about 20 yards. Try running with your head down on a football field for 20 yards. And when you wake up next season, tell me if you still have a career left. It's just not realistic at all. But that's not even really Emil.
That's everything, though. In that whole, there's the bench press, right? I mean, we both know that there's, I'm not saying it's bad to train with weights, but there's functional strength in that. I mean, I even, even at my age or your age, I go to a gym and work with dumbbells, and there's guys there that I know could ragdoll me, but I'll be doing more with dumbbells on a flat bench because it's just what I do. It's what I work out with. It doesn't, but I wouldn't go over and pick a fight with the guy. I'd be like, oh no,
there's just so much more involved, and I think a lot of the common fan out there want to tie in the physical with a person's performance and say, oh, that's why Myles Garrett is like that. No, that's only part of it. And one of the biggest people I use in this when I talk about that and think about that is Warren Sapp. Like Warren Sapp, gifted physically, obviously, but not in the higher end of that. Okay, shorter than most D tackles. Probably on a bench press, not impressive, I would say. Good strength, but not impressive. The biggest thing was his mind and just his understanding of what the offense was trying to do, how those blocks were going to have to come off. And that is the case for a lot of these high performers. Deion Sanders, 4.240, studied the game, understood the game. And the fact that he's a coach now is a little bit of evidence of that. That's the real reason why he was that kind of player.
You know what? I'd love to study this. And, I'm going to read up on this now. With everything that's out there, there has to be something to find on this. I'm going to bet you a lot of great athletes, now don't laugh here, have good minds geometrically. And what I mean by that is if you look at almost all sports, understanding angles is important.
Sure.
Angles, how you block a guy in football, angles on where you need to get to a ball.
Yeah, in baseball,
safety,
where a double team might be coming from in basketball. Yeah.
Right. And I'm going to bet you if you looked at their minds, they're very good with shapes and angles because they know where to meet a ball or where to run to meet a ball. If they're in center field in basketball, they see what's happening before it happens and anticipate it. And the other thing, like Warren Sapp, I bet you he had very good numbers at like a broad jump.
Well, he's a rock back dunker.
Mm-hmm.
Sideways, rock back dunker in the 290s. 280s, 290s.
He had very good numbers on the non-traditional things that most fans don't pay as much attention to. Most fans are looking 40, bench press, and I bet you if you go look at what his broad jump was, it was probably pretty good back in the day.
I would venture to say it was because he was explosive off of the ground, and that really helped with the first step quickness, getting on the get-offs, because that was his biggest thing. He could get in the gap before a guy, could ready himself to block him and stuff like that. That's not even the biggest thing that I want to take on here. Emil, we're in the quarterback era of football, or at least that's what they want us to believe. Shout out to Saquon and Derrick Henry for returning running backs to prominence, but we are definitely in the quarterback era. And I'm looking at the list here of the top 10 quarterbacks going into this combine. I'm sure there'll be a shakeup here.
Hit me with them.
Emil, this is not impressive. All right. According to NFL Draft Buzz, Shadir Sanders, number 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Cam Ward, number 2.
Okay.
Jackson Dart, number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how many quarterbacks do you think would be taken in the first round? 4 or 5, right? On the low end.
I mean, right now, if you're and this isn't a shot at him.
Jackson Dart, first round pick.
I agree with you. To me, he was always, I thought, a second round guy, but I could see him somehow becoming Bo Nix-like, at least his first year.
You're going to need the absolute right guy. You're going to need Sean Payton. Because Bo Nix in Tennessee we might have been calling him a bust. You want to hear the 4th name on this list?
Who?
Quinn Ewers.
No way.
Emil, I was very unimpressed by Quinn Ewers this year. And I really thought he was coming back to school.
You know this. I said that to you all season. As that season went on and I watched more and more Texas games and quite a bit of Texas games this year, I couldn't figure out by the 3-quarter mark how a guy who's such a good offensive mind like Sark did not have Arch Manning playing more, if not starting.
I'm sure a lot of Texas fans probably wondered the same. Quinn Ewers to me is a 3rd round pick, and I'm probably being nice. Number 5 is Jalen Milroe, who Emil to me has not proven himself to be a passer, an NFL type passer in this league. Can he take off and run with the football?
He's an amazing athlete. I'm not sure. I mean, listen, again, if he gets in the right situation and they clean him up and, as far as mechanically, and he sits a year, maybe he can be a really good quarterback. I mean, obviously.
4th, 5th rounder to me, Emil. All right, that kid Joe Milton from Tennessee went in the 6th. That kind of play.
Here, let me do this for you because it's not that far apart. Milroe, right? You're saying 4th rounder. Dak Prescott was a 4th rounder. Think about Dak Prescott's college career throwing and running the football compared to his.
Agreed. Longer, right? I think.
Longer, but he was also a much more accomplished passer.
I agree.
Yeah.
No doubt. Number 6, Riley Leonard. Emil, I watched that championship game.
Oh, dear gosh.
And there was a distinct avoidance of Riley Leonard throwing the football in situations where the ball needed to be thrown against Ohio State as you're losing the biggest game of the year. They were quite behind. This kid's not an accomplished thrower of the football. He's a good athlete. We saw that on the first drive. But Emil, he almost died that first drive.
There's no, yeah. I mean,
He did. He like almost lost his life.
hey, you can read the rest of the list, but if he's number 6, I don't
I'm
need.
gonna finish you out to 10.
Yeah,
Seven is Will Howard. I would urge everyone here to go on Twitter and go put Will Howard's name in there and just watch his throws at the combine. Him and Quinn Ewers. It's routes on air. Now, Emil, I'm 50, something. I throw the ball a lot in my training sessions. I legit looked at that and said I can do a better job than this throwing to receivers, even if they're guys I've never thrown to before. Like, are you serious? He was not close on. We're not talking about anything super complicated here. Speed out, a dig route, a corner ball.
I mean, I'm assuming like when you're throwing routes against nobody, it's like, okay, the receiver's going to run a 15-yard out and you're going to throw it.
Drop, set your feet, throw the ball to a guy who's unencumbered, did not have to change his route at all because there was a defender there, and hit him with the football. What's going on? Okay, Will Howard, Kyle McCord, who might be a sleeper, but if he's in the top 10, Dylan Gabriel, Emil, go talk to me about Dylan Gabriel from Oregon. You were not polite about this guy in certain
Listen, I'm actually, when you said you were going to read this before the show, I'm like, okay, I'm actually thinking about this list. And I mean, I wouldn't want to.
That's where we are, friend. Number 10, Curtis Rourke from Indiana. Had a great year. But what are we talking about? There's not enough data there.
The kid from Syracuse, McCord.
I like.
Yeah, I would actually, if I made that list,
I'm bumping him up ahead of yours. I'm putting him after Jackson Dart.
I was going to say, he's probably 4th on my list.
Yeah, I'm going to go 11 because people are talking about this kid, Tyler Shuck, the kid from Louisville. Impressive. I want to watch some more film on him. 6'5", 6'5" guy, 219 pounds. Josh Allen-ish, but I would hesitate on that.
The only guy I'd be excited to take out of that whole group this year where I think he'll be pretty good as long as the system's decent will be Ward. The rest of them, they're all hit and miss.
Yeah, look, if we're just back to Sanders and Ward, they got to go to the right places. There's no Andrew Luck. There's no Josh Allen. There's no Patrick Mahomes. There's no, John Elway in this. Okay, that's probably asking too much. But this list, Emil, is not good. It's not good. And they're going to hype them up coming out. It's
a crapshoot. I mean, you called it, so good for you. But, look at how excited people were about let's tank for Caleb Williams. And granted, he's only played 1 year. But, I mean, after 1 year, that's not looking good.
No. Hopefully, his new head coach can help him out. But that's that. We're here for college football today, though. We have this treat for you guys. We teased it a little bit towards the end of the season, but the time is now. We are going to shake up college football. We are going to make the conferences make sense. We're going to put together a super league of 48 teams, 48 top teams in college football, and we're going to make a super league, and we're going to have it resemble the NFL because that, right now, ladies and gentlemen, is the best playoff format in all of sports. That's what we're doing today. So here's what we got, Emil. We've got 2 conferences, all right? And for simplicity, we're going to call one league the National League. Sounds like baseball. And then the other conference is the American League. We'll call it the National Conference and the American Conference, all right? That's what we're doing here, and we have divisions within each of them. So, Emil, starting off in the National Conference, well, first of all, let's break this down for you, right? We're going to do the math here. How many teams in each division if we're going 48?
Well, first, let's start for the audience. Right now, as best as our research can tell, there's 133 FBS teams. Okay? And every year, 1 or 2 creeps up. They want to come up and not, whatever. We have 8 conferences because we want to mimic the NFL, right? And
we need some uniformity around here.
We can't do 32 teams. Not when you have 133. So we're going 48 teams. So, for those of you struggling with math, 48 divided by 8 is 6. And this is going to work out, I think. You and I can talk about this next show for our rules. But I'm seeing this working out really perfectly as I look at it, because you're going to play every team in your division. That's 5 games.
Yes.
6, you got 5. And then we're going to rotate, I think. And you play a game against every team in one of the other divisions. 5 and 7 is magically 12. And
Yes.
that's what teams are playing now, 12.
It just works out perfectly, and you're just going to rotate every year on what other division you're going to play against. And we'll
team. So every year you're going to grab one team. So every 6 years, you're going to play every team once from the other divisions.
It makes those meetings that much more meaningful, Emil, when they do happen. So let's break down these divisions. At the end, we'll tell you who we left out of this, and you guys can cry about it. But, as Emil said, today we're just showing you what the divisions and the conferences are. And then we've got rules that we're going to attach to this. We're going to change a few things.
That's next week's show. The rules you guys are going to like. Trust me, after you get a taste of this and you feel what we're putting down here, then you're going to look at the rules and go, wow, these guys have thought about this.
All right, Emil, so let me kick this off since we're talking about the region of the country that I am in. In the National Conference, our first division is the South Division. Strap up. Here's who's in that division. Number 1, we've got Miami. We've got Georgia. We've got Florida State, Alabama, Auburn, and Florida. Folks, all right, let me talk to my Miami fans. All right. You just joined this show and you didn't know who I was. Just know that I am an alumnus of the University of Miami, played there, and I'm telling you right now, fans down here will get so lathered up to be in a conference like this because you're going to get some kind of combination of Georgia, you already get Florida State, Alabama, Auburn, or Florida showing up to your stadium every year. That is something, I don't care how the sun is shining, how those waves are hitting, how sandy our beaches are, how much the liquor is flowing, all right? Or whatever your influencer schedule calendar says you have to do. You're getting to Hard Rock Stadium to watch these opponents come and play your University of Miami football.
While this the beauty of the ebbs and flows of a sport, historically all these teams are major teams, but it's not a terrible division right now in that Miami is kind of coming back. Georgia and Alabama are strong. Florida State's a disaster. Auburn is okay, I guess. Florida's on the way up. So, I mean, it's manageable because you have ebbs and flows.
Yeah, there's not right now, the way that it is, a truly going to run away with it. You could say Georgia maybe, but they showed that they are fallible this year, right? So, and when you compact it like this, I think you have a better chance for more competition when you boil this thing down into 16
teams. Will just like in pro football, where you get divisions that can't stand each other, like the NFC East and AFC West. You start building your teams for your division because
exactly. So you're not doing this against the whole 48 per se. You want to win your division and get to your playoffs every year. So just like Dallas is going to have to figure out some kind of way to build an offensive line to stop that front four for the Eagles, that's kind of what's going to happen in each one of these divisions. And it's going to make for a whole lot of fun recruiting when you got, once again, Miami, Georgia, Florida State, Alabama, Auburn, and Florida in the South Division of the National Conference. Emil, you can tell the folks who's in the northern part of the American Conference.
By the way, we're going to have to, you and I, think this through, okay, next week. And we won't disclose it because do we want the division winner to only be counted from division games?
Yeah, we're getting deep into the weeds there, but right now we're
going to have to get to that. So in the North, and this is a fun division. This will be almost like a mini Big Ten. We got Ohio State, we got Michigan, we've got Minnesota, we've got Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Illinois. I mean, there's some good rivalries in there. I mean, you got Ohio State, Michigan, you got Minnesota, Wisconsin's a rivalry, Michigan State. That's a nice division.
Yeah, look, obviously, we broke the Big Ten up that has like 57 teams in it right now. But when we compact it down into this, we intensify rivalries that have already, existed. And maybe we build up some new ones. So maybe there was, not as much tension between maybe two of these schools within the Big Ten. But once they're in this division now, they are definitely going to have to ratchet things up. So once again, that's Ohio State, Michigan. We already know about that. Minnesota, Michigan State, Wisconsin, and Illinois. Stay with us, though, if you're a Big Ten fan and you're wondering, did we just cut out all those other schools? Stay tuned. We're coming at you. So
now you have to go back to the.
I'm going back now into the National Conference.
Right.
In the Southeast Division, and here's what we have. LSU, Louisville, Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Clemson. Now, there's throwing Clemson into that group there makes it really interesting.
That's a fun division. I mean, you look at some teams that have been historically good, like LSU, Tennessee, and Clemson. You got some teams on the upswing, like Mississippi, South Carolina, and Louisville. So you kind of got that broken up into like I don't want to say blue blood, but quasi blue blood with like LSU, Tennessee, Clemson, and then you got the up and comers. Louisville, Mississippi, and South Carolina. That's a very interesting division.
Yeah, for you Clemson fans out there that may have been disenchanted with what the ACC offers you in terms of being able to compete on a national level because you don't love the week-to-week competition, and when you compare it to a Big Ten or an SEC, you get a chance to toss yourself in here with a couple of the big boys from that conference and hold some weight. Not that all that kind of stuff is going to matter now because we're going to run this thing like the NFL. But once again, it's LSU. It's Louisville, Mississippi, South Carolina, Tennessee. We round it out with Clemson.
Now we slide over to the American, right? And we called this division, and I almost feel like the emblem on the logo for the division should be a guy with a money bag. Okay.
On a horse.
On a horse.
A Lone Ranger holding a money bag.
That would be I won't say that on there. I don't want to get in any trouble. That would be a logo of a large bank.
Yes.
We'll call this the Southwest Division, okay?
Yeah, all NIL conference, but go ahead.
And you'll know what I'm talking about when you hear the participants. We got the Oklahoma Sooners, the Texas A&M Aggies, the Arkansas Razorbacks, the TCU Horned Frogs, the Texas Longhorns, and the Texas Tech Red Raiders. I mean, that is like the old sort of Southwest Conference throw in Oklahoma.
Emil, that's a lot of money. That's a lot of oil, and that's going to be a lot of intensity, especially on the recruiting trail. Like we've got, what do we got? Four schools out of this division are in the state of Texas. And Oklahoma might as well be there as well.
Yeah, making jokes, but you know what? I'm looking at this. Our younger audience won't even remember the Southwest Conference of Eric Dickerson, but you do. And that is almost the entire Southwest Conference of the major schools.
Minus SMU, basically.
Yeah, SMU, Baylor, and Houston. That were the other three. We really took the 5 big players from Texas and put them with Oklahoma, who has a huge rivalry with Texas.
Now, I see the 6 shooters coming out in the rivalries in this particular conference.
That would be a fun division.
No, this would definitely be fun. So you gotta love it. Oklahoma, Texas A&M, Arkansas, TCU, Texas, and Texas Tech for the Southwest in the American Conference. Sliding back over to the National Conference, the East Division, Penn State, Maryland, West Virginia, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, and NC State. Good old East football
Listen,
there.
That division, each team could end their season with a natural rival. Pitt, Penn State, West Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina State, okay? Not to mention, for our younger audience, again, huge rivalries there. Pitt and West Virginia is as close to Pitt and Penn. I mean, those two are probably equal. Pitt, West Virginia, Pitt, Penn State. That they call that the I-79 game. The schools, Morgantown and Pittsburgh, are not that far apart. I mean,
yes.
that would be a brutal division in terms of a lot of dislike.
Yes. And Emil, the nostalgia in me Well, first, let me just read that off again for you. The East Division of the National Conference: Penn State, Maryland, West Virginia, North Carolina, Pittsburgh, and NC State. Now, this next one that you're going to do just warms my heart with nostalgia as we return these rightful teams to their rightful region and pack them together so that they can get back after it and hate each other.
The American Conference Western Division, we've got USC, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Arizona State, and UCLA. That just feels right.
It just feels so good. I can see the Pacific Ocean waves crashing against the sand right now.
And it feels even better not to have to say Washington State and Oregon State.
Yeah, well, what can I say about that? We'll talk about where these teams go momentarily. Stay with us. All right, so again, USC, Oregon, Washington, Arizona, Arizona State, and UCLA. All right, so for the final division in the National Conference, it's called the Plains. We've called it the Plains Division here on the Two Chumps Football Podcast. That is going to include Iowa, Iowa State, Missouri, Kentucky, Virginia Tech, and Notre Dame. We've pulled Notre Dame off their high horse, and we've stuck them in a division where they must comply with the demands of college.
So you look at this, it kind of other than Virginia Tech, and folks, you got to remember when you do this, we're trying to get as close geographically as we can, but we had decisions to make, like everybody does in life.
Sure.
We said we got West Virginia.
What we didn't do is take Stanford and put them in the ACC.
Correct.
We didn't do that.
But we had Virginia Tech and West Virginia. We debated it. We said, well, West Virginia's got some really good traditional rivalries in the East. And I'm sure Virginia Tech would argue with you that we have some too with North Carolina and NC State. But we had to make a decision. We made a call. It's our league. We'll put Virginia Tech where we want to. They're going to be in the Plains, but everybody else fits here. Iowa, Iowa State, Missouri. Kentucky's like right there, kind of bumping up against Ohio, right? I mean, they're right there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we're fine. Notre Dame's in the Plains. It's fine.
Look, if you're puzzle piecing this thing with the teams in the division, I think we did a really good job.
And if you're Notre Dame, you're kind of happy because if you're looking at this division, traditionally, you should win it almost every year.
Well, Notre Dame performs against teams they should be.
That's true.
You can fumble this, folks. Trust me.
And then we slide over our final division, right? So repeating the Plains: Iowa, Iowa State, Missouri, Kentucky, Notre Dame, Virginia Tech. So our final division is the Mountain Division of the American Conference: Colorado, Oklahoma State, Nebraska. And listen, before anybody even gets, I don't want any wise asses here. Chad and I are both aware that Nebraska and Kansas are very flat, okay?
Yeah, for you folks born after 1999, relax.
Yeah, we're aware, okay? We just had to call it something. It's the Mountain Division. Colorado, Oklahoma State, Nebraska, Utah, big mountains, BYU. Yes. They're in Utah. They don't drink, and they're all 25 years old, but they have a good football team, and Kansas State.
Correct. And there you go. A great division right there, right?
I mean, honestly, Nebraska-Colorado was a longtime rivalry, and they're still trying to rekindle that recently. I mean, that's a good division. BYU, that's great.
Love it. All right, so that's our Super League 48. All right, we're going to get into the rules next week, but this, just going to tell you right now, Super League is going to have a commissioner, not a body, not the NCAA, a single man that is
one of us who should be commissioner. And we can appoint ourselves commissioner and something else, like CEO and COO.
In all honesty, if he would take this job on, Emil, and we could talk more about this next week as we dig deeper into how this thing is going to function, I have one person that I would put as commissioner of this league right now. Can you guess?
Nick Saban.
Absolutely.
Oh, Nick, I love this.
Absolutely. He's my guy to do this. And I don't even know that Nick's, motivated by money right now, but I would throw what I need to throw at him to get him to do this.
As long as it doesn't stop him from doing the commercials, because I like his commercials.
No fun. No, that's a rule.
So next week we will lay out the playoff system the rules, because we need to think through that. I mean, honestly,
rules on transfers, NIL. What do we do about money? Because we know money runs college
before we
football.
go anywhere, I think we would be doing a disservice to the fans out there who want to bitch at us, because they're all saying, how did such and such not make it? So we have a list of some teams that we considered. And I'll throw them out there, and Chad can comment as to why perhaps they didn't make the cut. An obvious one that's probably maybe the younger fans don't see it, but I think anybody over age 30 does, 35. Syracuse didn't make it. Now,
all those folks in New York pissed, but
I mean, to be fair, Syracuse has quite an alumni list of great players, and I'm not going to include them all, but obviously Jim Brown, Ernie Davis, movie made after him, Heisman winner, Donovan McNabb, and there's a lot of other ones, right? I mean, wide receiver,
Marvin Harrison, if you just want to throw a name out there.
Yeah, so I mean, it's tough to leave Syracuse out of this, but when you start doing it, we don't want leagues where teams are traveling across the country.
Sure.
So
we got to make this fit.
Yeah, we say, where do we put them? I mean, who do we throw out of the East, let's say, to include Syracuse?
Kind of tough to do that.
Kind of tough to do. But don't worry, folks. We'll address Syracuse and the rest of these teams' bitches next week, because we have a solution for it. Right. Another one. We were talking about the combine earlier, and you told a great story of Calvin Johnson.
Right.
How about Georgia Tech? I mean, the Rambling Wreck, rich history in terms of the creation of Bobby Dodd, right? Was Dodd? Yeah.
Yes. Right. I mean, they named the stadium after the guy.
Right. So, I mean, Georgia Tech's got a rich history, obviously a big rivalry with Georgia.
They do. Folks in Atlanta right now looking at Miami in the 48 when Georgia Tech beat them this year is probably bitching, but you're not going to compare your football history to Miami's football.
No, but I mean, listen, we definitely recognize a team like Georgia Tech being left out of our league. Another one would be Stanford. I mean, there's a team that's produced John Elway, Jim Plunkett, right?
Andrew Luck, I get it. They've got a few names in there, but again, stacking it up against
with the coach there, Jim Harbaugh.
Sure.
Best Stanford story I ever heard was John McKay one. When anybody doesn't, John McKay's a legendary USC coach from the 60s and early 70s who was very sarcastic, and after a game with Stanford at the end, he went for 2 up pretty big in the game. And they asked McKay, why did you go for 2? Up, 28 points. He said, because I couldn't go for 3.
That's a guy for you. Yeah.
Another one that I mentioned from the old Southwest Conference, and I don't have as much trouble leaving these guys out because their history is more in the last 15 years. They were pretty brutal for a long time. But if you're going recency, Baylor. I mean, Baylor's been...
Sorry, RG3.
Yeah.
Sorry, Xavier Howard. We didn't put Baylor.
I'm leaving out again. Most of their history is checkered in that they've had a lot of bad years, but they did produce Gale Sayers. Kansas.
It's Kansas, man. All right. Again, we've got plans for these teams. We'll talk about it next week.
One more, and honestly, this one is based only on the last 20 years where they've been pretty competitive, because for a long time they were a doormat. But how about Washington State?
You mentioned a couple of names as we're going through the conference that I don't think we had down on our list, but you did mention Washington State. Yes, tough to leave them out, but again, we got to make things fit. I don't know who we would throw out of that West Division. I'm in Houston also, but of late, Houston hasn't really killed it. It's just we made a Southwest Conference and didn't include Houston. Hey, it is what it is. Sorry to David Klinger and
But this will be fun, and I actually think this isn't as crazy as it sounds like. We're doing this kind of tongue in cheek, but I actually do believe we will. Maybe not this exact format. I think college football is going to migrate to something like this, and I think where you'll see it. And you've said this for years. I mean, before we were doing this format of show, we would talk and bowl games would happen and people would say, Boise State upset Oklahoma in the Orange Bowl. And even if it was a game that meant something to Oklahoma, it was a one-off game. And
right.
What happens is people don't realize is it's very hard for a team like that to play that schedule week in, week out. If you give them 3 weeks off, they might get
sure. This eliminates that.
This eliminates that, and you really saw that in these playoffs this year.
Yeah. I agree with you on that. I really do feel like we're moving towards a Super League. I don't know if it'll be 48 teams or 32 teams, but I would love for it to look something like this. Before we let you go, Emil, when I look at this lineup, and remember, we're going with NFL playoff format here. So that goes with 4 division winners from each conference.
Yep.
And then 3 wild cards. And when I look at it this year, Emil, in that South Division, I think I'm not talking crazy when I think Georgia would have been your winner there. I think our winner in the Southeast would have been Tennessee. Mm-hmm. If folks remember what was there, obviously your East winner is Penn State.
Yep.
Your Plains winner is Iowa State. And I think
Notre Dame, they were in the championship.
Notre Dame, my bad. We didn't change that around there.
He's got a block. He can't stand Notre Dame.
No, it's not. I actually rooted for Notre Dame.
I know. I'm just giving you a hard time.
And I think our wild cards, Emil, would have been Miami, Alabama, and Mississippi out of this conference.
Yeah, I think that's probably solid. Yeah, Miami, Alabama, Mississippi. Yep. So yeah, that would be your 7 there. And on the other side, I mean, North is Ohio State, obviously. I look Texas is the Southwest. Or Oregon, obviously, out west. And then
what do you think, Mountain?
That would have been interesting, huh? BYU had a good year. I mean,
BYU or Colorado?
Yeah.
I did have starred here Colorado, but I think I did that early. So vice versa on that.
And then your wild cards likely would have been, let's see here, you can make a good case for Arizona State, of course. Maybe whoever didn't win between BYU and Colorado. And then, I mean, it's funny, but Illinois won 10 games, didn't they? Or 9.
Did they? I was thinking Texas.
Illinois had go look them up. I think
they had a good year. If you include that bowl game, I was thinking Texas A&M, but you might be right. So we might have a situation where people would be pissed about it, but Illinois gets in there, beating out at Texas A&M.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so listen to these names: Miami, Georgia, Mississippi, Tennessee, Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Illinois, Texas, Oregon, Arizona State, BYU, Colorado. That's your playoffs. I mean, folks, this is it. This is what I tune in big time to see.
What people don't realize, and you and I have talked about this a lot off air as friends, the current format of college football, scheduling really matters to the point that because the schedule is like an NFL schedule is fairly homogenous. Almost every team has a mix of 6 or 7 common opponents.
Right.
You look this past year, and again, I'm not trying to pick on teams that had good years, but Indiana just missed everybody. It was a year where they didn't have to play anybody in the conference. They built up a resume against some weak sisters and got some confidence. And by the time they played Ohio State, they were undefeated. So, they basically went 11-1 and probably didn't belong in that playoff.
Right. I think we picked pretty solid teams here. Again, we're going to break some things further down next week. Emil has some pretty solid ideas on some rules that can, balance things out even more than just the way that we've arranged these divisions. And then some other ways that, even the teams that didn't make it in could.
Yeah, you're not. Let's tease you. You're not out. If you're out, if your school's out, they're not out forever.
Yeah. So that's just a teaser on that. We're gonna have more on this, but those are our divisions. If you're watching this on YouTube, gonna have that broken down for you. If you couldn't remember, and who knows, I'm not sure if we're gonna have some graphics on this, but I will definitely have it laid out for you in the description. But this is. You'd have to be excited about something like this if you're a true college football fan and you're just not a guy that hops in.
Sending it to the NCAA via email. Remember, we get royalties.
We want mass petitions. If you love this, we want mass petitions sent to the NCAA so that we could get this done And, also, obviously, college football would have to separate from all of the other sports because, none of this would.
It'd be interesting to see if it ever happens because you wonder if they don't mess it up. And never doubt how bad these guys can mess things up. But if they didn't mess it up, I often wonder, would it start to push the NFL in terms of how it's, how
there's a chance because the NFL does, have their fair times of when they piss the general public off. How many boycotts of the NFL have been called for in the last 5 years?
Yeah, but with the NFL is that we've always talked about it. It's the easiest league for people to gamble on, play fantasy football. There's only 32 teams. This would start to be like, hey, I only have to follow the 48 biggest teams. And you wouldn't have these games where even if your school is playing, you're disinterested. Like, you don't want to see your school play a MAC team.
Right. No, we've got serious games every week. And once again, it would be you play everyone in your division, plus each year you rotate which other division teams you're going to play home and away, obviously. And it works out perfectly because it's 6 teams. So you'd get 3 home games, 3 away games from the other division that you're playing against. So this is
what I was suggesting, and this is where we have to get on the same page. We'll talk about that. What I'm saying is not even like the NFL with the whole division. Every team, because it's perfect, there's 6, you rotate playing one team from each of the other 7 divisions.
Possible. Maybe something for us to talk.
That would make 12 games.
Yeah, possible. Possible that we could do that.
We'll talk about it. It'll be in our rules.
Yeah, we'll hash that out, bring that to you next week. But for now, we are for sure. This is what we would love to see in terms of the 48 teams, the way the conferences break down and the way the divisions go. So you got to get with us next week and check out what else we bring with this in our next show. We appreciate you guys taking the time to watch and listen to us. Now that all the football stuff's over, we know you guys are still gambling, and have no fear. We are still going to, pass out our fair share of sports wagering advice here on this show, but we just really wanted to tackle this college football thing.
We'll do in the coming weeks because you and I are better at this. We'll do baseball futures.
Well, we might mess with that. So
yeah, we'll mess with some
for those of you that want to get into that. And by the way, for you hardcore football fans that can just never imagine yourself jumping into the baseball arena, I'm here to tell you, you can make some pretty good coin messing around with baseball. All right. And perhaps the folks here at Two Chumps Football Podcast can help you there. But that's it. Our time's up for this show. We appreciate you joining us once again on your way out. If you haven't already, subscribe to the show. Hit our sponsor, Bovada Sportsbook. There'll be a link in the description down below. And outside of that, man, we're out of here. For Emil, Calomino, I'm Chad Wilson. Thanks for watching the Two Chumps Football Podcast. We'll see you guys next week.